everyone. It's great to be back at ABLF City, the wonderful virtual setting of the ABLF Live Talks, as we bring you more high-level guests to discuss issues relevant to our lives as we look at rethinking globalization. Now, the COVID pandemic has now dragged on for most of 2020, forcing us to adjust the way we lead our lives and conduct business. The global economy has taken quite a major adjustment that's impacted the lives of billions of people. So how we move forward in getting businesses back on track is a crucial subject as we approach 2021, perhaps a new year and a new start. For the UAE, a major business hub located in the center of the world, literally, that's an issue that's keeping everyone on their toes. The Dubai Multi-Commodities Centre, known widely as DMCC, is a leading international and multi-award-winning base for many of the businesses established in Dubai. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce our guest for this session, a person who's been a leading figure in securing DMCC's reputation as a globally leading authority here on international commodities, trade and enterprise. Feryal Ahmadi is the Chief Operations Officer of DMCC, heading up the teams that have created marketplaces that increase global trade flows through Dubai. In addition, Feryal is a committed member of the Women Empowerment Principles established by the United Nations Global Compact and UN Women. So it's great to get a perspective on the path that businesses now have to navigate in a very different world. Feryal, it's a real pleasure to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
It's wonderful. It's good to get your perspective on things. I'm going to actually start asking you about the backlash against globalization being seen on a cultural and socio-economic front with, I guess, what new definition of the term globalization are you expecting in the post-COVID world?
So certainly the term globalization that we understand it, and we've seen it in the past decade, will certainly be redefined. We see way more increase in protectionism as we go into the next decade, and that is mainly underpinned by the geopolitical tensions that are ongoing, which does not look like it's gonna resolve anytime soon. So things will very likely get worse before they start getting better. And trade organizations such as WTO as well have a huge role to play here in actually looking at the gaps, at the challenges, at bringing the international community back around the table again in order to address some of these challenges. And a lot of governments today, we see they are calling for a reform of the World Trade Organization as well.
So, Feryal, I'm going to just pick up on a point you were making, if I may, that you expect, the issue of deglobalization and the tensions that sort of being created in this current environment will get worse, in your opinion. Give me a little more perspective on that, please.
Absolutely. It will. I mean, I think what will define the trade landscape in the next decade is obviously the geopolitical tensions highlighted by the US-China ongoing tension, as well as the recovery from the pandemic. I mean, in April of this year, the World Trade Organization anticipated a 1% reduction in world trade and 13 to 32% of reduction in trade volumes as well. Now, that will take over a decade in order to recover. However, on the brighter side, we've seen that a lot of existing trade trends have actually accelerated as a result of the pandemic. I mean, you look at the application of technology, for example. We are all looking at telehealth, online education, remote working. You're looking at digitization, robotics, and AI. There is also a recalibration of supply chains that a lot of businesses have gone through. Everyone is looking towards simplification, diversification, risk and resilience. And there is also a call to look at trade policies one more time and look at the role that national security plays in trade policy. It's very, very important to start defining the regulations around things like data sharing, data flows across jurisdictions, IP protection, and so forth.
Right. So yes, you're right. We're being forced into the digital world. Not necessarily a bad thing, but if the broad analysis points to these trends in deglobalization, what immediate impact do you expect it to have in affecting trade between Asia and the Western world?
Mm-hmm. So DMCC launched the Future of Trade report, which is our flagship report anticipating the trends in future of trade for the next decade. We launched the third edition. And there were 4 highlights and main drivers out of this report, which talked about the application of technology, which talked about the growth in cross-border trade, innovation in trade policy and what governments and businesses should do in the absence of a challenging multilateral and international scene to look at bilateral trade, to look at plurilateral trade. And fourth is investment in infrastructure and trade-related infrastructure. So if we look at these 4 main drivers for the next decade, you are looking at a potential increase in trade up to $18 trillion.
So that, what do you see as the major catalyst then, perhaps recovery in terms of trade and commodities in the UAE in the backdrop of this situation that's being created by COVID?
Well, I think what is first and foremost on everyone's mind is the recovery and fast recovery and turnaround from the pandemic. For sure, continue investment in digitization and innovation and technology, which together with that, there is a huge need for governments to actually focus on digital education, on reskilling the workforce that will be impacted by digitization and by AI, and work together very closely with the private sector in terms of continuously funding the infrastructure investments. I mean, at the end of the day, there is very little value to have commodities, to have goods without having the necessary infrastructure in order to enable the flow of those goods around the world.
Feryal, I mean, mashallah, it's been a great success for the UAE. It's retained its position as a global commodity trading hub in the world. What factors do you think have led to that consistently good performance?
So the UAE, I think, has established itself as a global trading hub, both on the regional and on the international level. And I think what underpins that is the open trade policy that the UAE has always adopted, and also its continuous key focus and leadership on areas such as innovation, digitization, technology, trade finance, regulation, and sustainability. So looking at the Future of Trade report, we focus on 3 different indices. And you can see in the commodities index, for example, the UAE sustains its position as a global trading hub in commodities in the next decade. In terms of the digitization index, you can see that majority of businesses in the UAE have actually adopted digitization in their trading operations, in their supply chains, and the UAE is continuously advocating and adopting environmental sustainable technologies moving forward and is a pioneer in that. And I think that has helped the UAE in terms of its positioning and to sustain its positioning in the global trade moving forward.
Yeah, so these indices, I guess, have been an ideal roadmap because they
Absolutely.
have been progressive in keeping. So if you have to adjust that roadmap in any way going forward, what would you have to look at?
I think that the roadmap is very clear, and I think the leadership also in the UAE are very open-minded, very adaptable, and very flexible to the changes that's happening around them. And the solutions that they put in place is also very flexible. As well, considering the geopolitical tensions around, considering the economic markets around us today.
You know, these future of trade reports that DMCC has been publishing, obviously a very valuable tool. Based on those reports, if you can share with us maybe 5 solutions you feel might help with the recovery of global trade, what would they be?
So the 4 drivers that I spoke about are the key in terms of what businesses and governments should be focusing on moving forward. And one of the beauties of the Future of Trade report is that once it talks about those 4 key drivers of global trade, it actually provides very tangible and unique recommendations to policymakers, to businesses, to governments in order to portray what role they can actually play in the global economy moving forward. And from a business perspective, for example, recalibration of supply chains becomes key, advocating with domestic governments, for example, in order to adopt technologies that facilitate trade, such as blockchain, such as acceptance of digital documents moving forward. When it comes to governments, working together in order to find a solution for the World Trade Organization reform. Looking at how different entities can cooperate together through bilateral agreements, regional agreements, and adoption of the digital technology when it comes to a government level, and investment in digital infrastructure is key for any government moving forward today. And obviously with that comes the need for digital education, comes the need for reskilling the workforce that may be impacted by the digital digitization moving forward.
Now, having been based in the UAE for about 20 years myself now, I've seen how nimble and quick the adjustments can be here. It's quite startlingly quick in adjusting. And I'm presuming that, you know, these key factors you're describing that have led to the kind of success we've witnessed here could serve as shared experience for other countries, other areas that want to look at guidance at this difficult time. How much are you getting kind of approached for guidance in helping others to achieve the same kind of success?
Absolutely, we get approached a lot, both on a regional level and international level, to share best practices in terms of transformation, best practices in terms of strategy, and as you mentioned, how to be nimble and scalable in terms of the solutions that we put forward, and how to look for opportunities. I can say that in itself is also a very unique talent. Under current circumstances, the Abraham Accord, for example, between the UAE and Israel has been great. It just shows how 2 parties can come together under these challenging periods to form an agreement that can completely unlock and open new markets, not just for these entities alone, but for the whole region. I mean, we are talking about billions and billions of potential trade growth and thousands of additional jobs and so forth that will be created as a result of the Abraham Accord agreement.
Yeah, of course, the country, the UAE, can become a conduit for so many others. Let me get a question that's coming from our chat, if I may, please, Feryal. It says, what are some of the significant growth opportunities that have emerged in the new trade ecosystems this year? And that's come from Jasmine Kaur in Abu Dhabi.
So There has been a number of growth opportunities that we have seen in various different sectors, and as well as various different industries. So we see a spike when it comes to digitization. We see a spike when it comes to crypto industry, telehealth industry, digitization. So those have been core because the demand for those e-commerce in particular has been core from what DMCC sees, and we are the largest free trade zone today. We register over 200 companies a month, and we can very quickly see the trend in terms of what businesses are actually scaling and and we do see that the areas of technology, of digitization, of e-commerce, of telehealth have spiked up rapidly this year.
And I have to say, I mean, for those who don't know, it's a multi award-winning free zone, recognized globally. So congratulations on the success DMCC has had. I'm going to get another question, and you've touched on this to some degree in our discussion so far. But this question that's come in on our chat asks, how are free zones accommodating the digital advances that are transforming global trade?
Can you elaborate a little more on?
That's how the question's coming, but I guess what I would read into this is, how are you dealing with your clients, the people who are set up in the MCC, to help facilitate their adaptation to digital transformation?
Okay. So I will answer this question from multiple sides. From a DMCC and free zone perspective, we are, and even this is way before the pandemic, all our services are provisioned online 100%. So any entity can actually set up with DMCC and be licensed with DMCC without ever coming to Dubai or DMCC. So this has been 100%. All the verifications happen online. There is no paperwork whatsoever. So our members are very much used to this. And once the pandemic hit, there was no change in terms of our service provisions to our members. On another hand, we also conduct very, very frequent networking events, seminars that on various different topics. Digitization is a huge focus, digitization transformation right now in order to support our entrepreneurs and SMEs to relook at their supply chain, see how they can digitize certain elements within their business operations in order to ensure scalability, risk, and resilience moving forward.
So interestingly, another question that came in on chat from Huda in Dubai, asking, have the reputation, or the relationship of DMCC and Dubai with other countries been affected in this post-COVID-19 situation?
I mean, putting the COVID, I think, implications aside, obviously we have all gone through the restrictions that governments put in place, travel bans, etc., due to the pandemic. But however, from a trade perspective, I don't believe the relationship. I mean, as I mentioned, the UAE has always adopted an open trade policy, and it welcomes investors, trade, visitors from all over the world. And this continues to be the case.
It's interesting you said how at DMCC you're very proactive with your large client base in making sure everything goes in the right direction, helping. I guess just trying to get an inside peek into what's been happening in the last half a year. What sort of feedback are you getting back from the various companies set up at DMCC in terms of what their requirements are, or how they feel that they could move forward with the DMCC's help?
So we have not had, I mean, thankfully, our retention rates have remained extremely high, very similar to the post-pandemic, which means that the way we have dealt with our existing member base, we have offered them huge business support packages, as we call, in order to handhold them through this very difficult period. And that constituted services across our free zone, licensing, visas, property, waivers, discounts, support, and they have been extremely appreciative of that for the existing member base, and that continues until end of the year. In terms of new companies as well, again, we have offered business support packages for those companies coming from various different countries, various industries as well. And our new company registrations have also been pretty high, I can say, considering the situation. So we are still very happy with the numbers.
And it's interesting, of course, you know, I said at the beginning in the introduction, perhaps 2021 is a new year and a fresh start. We're all hoping that things will change with the COVID situation. You, of course, have Expo, the Dubai Expo coming up next year, having been postponed due to COVID. But of course, it brings a lot of people into the region. So I'm sure, again, it's an opportunity. I mean, I came to the country, I fell in love, and I basically moved here. I'm sure that's going to be you know, an opportunity for many people when they come to see the country too.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And we are working very closely with various stakeholders when it comes to Expo to see not only in terms of how we can promote Dubai, but what we can do for this huge wave of visitors and investors and entrepreneurs who will come to Dubai looking for opportunities during this period. How can we work together as various Dubai stakeholders in order to be able to provide something for all of those different entities that will, some of them will be coming to the UAE for the first time, and to put our best foot forward, as they say.
So Feryal, a question's come in from Giles Benson on our chat. And I mean, I guess, you know, I'm asking you to tackle this because the question has come up and, you know, I can put it to you. Giles says that, you know, we still issue around 10 checks a day because of demand. How does the UAE move towards a more modern and quicker way of banking? I think there is movement, but how would you suggest more progress in that area?
So I think the UAE has come a long way in terms of the banking sector and services provision. Obviously, there is a lot more room to improve as well moving forward. In terms of DMCC, though, we do work with certain banks very, very closely, and we do recommend them to our members in order to ensure that they have a very seamless experience, especially on particular sectors such as diamonds, precious stones, precious metals, where they may be facing some difficulty with other banks due to compliance issues and so forth.
Are you seeing, you know, because of we're seeing our newly kind of shaped world, are you seeing certain areas, certain sectors growing in the DMCC registrations?
Absolutely, yes. So we see the precious stones and diamond sector growing. I mean, once the UAE signed the Abraham Accord, the next day the DMCC signed with the Israel Diamond Exchange, and they have set up their presence, physical presence in the Dubai Diamond Exchange here with us, which is a great success story for the UAE to become the world's diamond trading hub. Not just the gold trading hub moving forward. There is a lot of opportunity in the precious stones sector as well that we see, as well as the agri-commodity sector. We've had an extremely successful story with tea, the DMCC Tea Center, the DMCC Coffee Center, and we are looking at other commodities that we can bring both producing and consuming nations together in order to bring their produce here and avail the facilities and services that Dubai can provide, and use this infrastructure in order to reship this product to other parts of the world.
And of course, it is such a, you know, fantastically located, geographically located hub in this respect too. So then many businesses are, of course, going to have to pivot. Those who are not particularly in the growth sectors. Is there any advice you can give them in how they can at least keep themselves up to date or pivot their businesses to be more successful where the challenges have hit them in this COVID era?
I think it's extremely important to relook at the supply chain, to make sure that you have diversity, that you have you look at simplification as much as you can, and you consider risk resilience as well. I mean, we saw a number of businesses who were actually handicapped once this happened because of their concentration on one region or one entity. I think this was a lesson learned for a lot. And two, do not ignore technology. I think technology is the next era. Digitization is coming. And I think the pandemic actually forced this trend and accelerated it way, way more than anyone could anticipate. So if you could take these two away, I would definitely recommend that every business adopts those moving forward.
And you know, it's interesting, a little bit later I'll be speaking with the UAE's ambassador to the United Kingdom. Corridors are developing in terms of travel. I know when I've had to travel a little bit recently, that the flights coming into Dubai, in and out, I guess, with tourism seem to be getting quite busy again. It seems people are coming back. So I think that this idea of creating corridors also is quite a valuable tool right now.
Absolutely, absolutely, it is. Yes, yes.
And I'm wondering whether that might also be a way, you know, businesses might operate at some stage.
Absolutely. Very.
Well, Feryal, I want to thank you so much for being with us. It was great to have your perspective on what's going on, and it's great to hear that the DMCC is staying strong. And of course, that relationship with its client, the customer base and clients and businesses there is remaining very strong. So congratulations on you being able to kind of adapt quickly to those changing environments as well.
Thank you, Rez. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Hope to speak to you again. Lots of luck and stay safe.
Thank you. Same to you.
Well, there we have to end the session, even though there are obviously so many more questions we could ask. Feryal Ahmadi has been giving us a fantastic perspective on how businesses are adapting, you know, here in this the pandemic era, if you like, here in Dubai. We're still seeing, as I say, growth and success. So that's great news as well. Now, thank you very much for those of you joining us at ABLF City for this session. Don't go away, there'll be more coming up very soon, so stay tuned for that.